The worst revolver ever made, the Clerke first. Let's check it out. Today we're going to take a look at the Clerke first. This was made by Clerke Technicore out of Santa Monica, California. And this came about because of the 1968 Gun Control Act, which limited small Saturday night specials from being imported into the country. Or really just concealable firearms. The Walther PPK was not allowed to be imported into the country under this law. Also mini Berettas and a lot of other type firearms. But there were a lot of small, very inexpensive guns that were being brought into the U.S. Clerke Technicore came from a company, EIG, that made really good cutlery. And the funny thing is the Clerke Technicore also made really nice bench rifles, target rifles. And they also made a semi-automatic pistol. But today we're going to take a look at the revolver. This is in .22 long rifle. They also made it in .32 Smith & Wesson short. But this actually came from starter pistols. And really, the starter pistol and the .22 and the .32 are pretty much the same gun. When these went on the market in 1971, the retail price was 20 bucks. So guys, you weren't getting much in the first place. Now this was given to my mother a number of years ago as a self-defense pistol from a friend of hers. What's funny is my mom has a SIG P238, which is the exact extreme of this Clerke first. The Clerke first, or also known as the Clerke worst. This has, by many people, have been called the worst revolver ever made. I always thought that the Rome RG revolver made out of Germany, which is also referred to as rotten gun, was the worst. But this definitely takes the cake. I mean, honestly, it looks like something you would pull out of a toy box. These originally started, again, as starter pistols. And really, the starter pistol looks exactly like this. The .32 Smith & Wesson short, it is a 5-round. This is a 6-round double single-action revolver. And it's made from a zinc alloy. But you can see that the chrome plating on here, while it looks a little toyish, it's really held up very well. And it's pretty shiny. But really the design of the pistol is very awkward. I mean, everything about it. I mean, even the hammer. I mean, it looks like it's just a plastic hammer. It is a zinc alloy. Has some knurling on the top. And let's go ahead and we're going to have to unload it. Now, because it is double single action, the cylinder does swing out. But you have your cylinder pin here, and it's held in by a spring detent. So you can just pull it out. And then as we drop the cylinder, and then you have 6 shots, and again, .22 long rifle. One thing you will notice is that the cylinder is like crazy loose. And, you know, even just the way it sits back and forth. And so that really lends people to have a lot less confidence in this. But the funny thing is once you lock this up, and even in here, it's rolling around. We're going to put our pin back in. But once you lock the hammer back into the rear position, it has a little movement, but when you have rounds in the cylinder, which the rounds sit on the outside of the cylinder, it definitely adds to locking this up to pretty solid. So, you know, we didn't have any problems. But from what I understand, these pistols had a lot of quality issues right out of the box. Some of them wouldn't even work from the factory. But this one, we took it down to the range, and we're going to show you all that in a minute, but it ran fairly well. The double action is very heavy, and I'm not going to dry fire it because it is rim fire and it can mess it up. But the single action though is not bad at all. And really, there's zero recoil with this little gun. Now, it has these kind of plastic faux wood grips, and to me, that's probably the best looking feature of the whole gun. But fit and finish is not bad, it's just the design is absolutely horrific. The sights, it's just a notch that's cast into the entire frame. And then you have that front sight, and so, you know, which is not terrible, but it's really poor quality, poor design. Of course, the pin is steel, the cylinder's steel, and there are parts. The firing pin, which is pinned to the hammer, it is also steel. Here we have a steel sleeve for the barrel, and then the zinc alloy surrounds it as a sleeve. Trigger is just that same alloy, but you can see, I mean, the finish on here is just like a chrome bumper on a 1950s car. I mean, it is really shiny. And I think this was the only way they came, is in this chrome finish. But the 32 is pretty much the same. Now, some had kind of a trident kind of piece that came out here, but with this one, it just has some checkering that makes it easy, but it is hard to pull out. One thing when you are unloading it is a lot of people find that you do need to bring that hammer back a little bit to allow that cylinder to fall out. The barrel is 2¼ inches in length. Overall, I mean, it's just a very small pistol. Now, again, these came into being because of these cheap firearms that were coming out of Europe at the time, especially Italian and even German pistols. And they were filling a market of just really inexpensive firearms. And then the U.S. started making those same things. I have a number of different, the Raven 25 ACP is a little pot metal pistol, the Jennings, which is now the Jimenez. There's a lot of these type firearms that were produced. Now, whether these are really high quality or not, it was something that filled a gap with people that really had low incomes. So while I'm not a big fan of somebody having this for self-defense, you know, as long as it functions, it could be a viable option. Now, for me, of course, obviously, I have a lot nicer guns, and so this to me is it's just a curious relic, is what it is. It's something that, you know, it's just kind of cool to see and see how low that we could really go. But again, for us, when we took this to the range, we only had one malfunction, and it was just a light primer strike. Otherwise, it ran. Now here on the frame, we have Clerke first, manufactured by Clerke Technicore in Santa Monica, California. They did move down to Florida and then just went out of business. But again, starter pistols, 22s, 32, and I really would like to check out their semi-automatic version. I'm sure that it is more of the low quality like this rather than their bench rifles. We're going to pull the grips off because I just want to show you the hammer spring in the back. And it's just a straight spring that comes all the way around. It's framed in with the frame. There is a small screw here that you can take this out. And I mean, it's really very simple. What's funny is you have this plate right here that's separate, which you can take it off if you needed to do any kind of maintenance. But this is really pretty much one piece except for this plate. Let's take a look at the inside. You see the little lockups right here. Like your standard revolver, it does have these small little gaps. But this gun has not been shot a lot. In fact, I may have been the first one to shoot it. But, you know, I was really a little concerned with this going on. But pretty much overall, I mean, it shot fine. It functioned. Again, the light primer strike was definitely a little different. Now, one thing you want to make sure is when you're getting that cylinder pin in that you get it all the way closed. Now, one thing that would get misplaced is this pin. A lot of times people are taking them apart. They misplace the pin. They would order a new pin, and it would cost almost as much as the handgun itself. Now, as far as the trigger action, really heavy. Actually, not too bad. I put some snap caps in here because with rimfire cartridges, it can damage the firing pin to dry fire. And then single action, as we pull it back, not a bad break. I mean, it's not that terrible. I mean, it's actually a pretty decent break. We're going to check the double action trigger pull, their Lyman trigger gauge from Brownells. 11 pounds, 13.1 ounces. Single action, 3 pounds, 13.7 ounces. Now the weight was 16.8 ounces, so again, it weighs about a pound. It's got a little bit of heft to it. We only brought about 100 rounds out to shoot through this. This is not something you want to spend a range day with, just to kind of test it out, accuracy, things like that. And we really appreciate Fiocchi for sponsoring the ammo. And this is just standard velocity ammunition. I wouldn't shoot really high pressure loads in this. Next, we're going to load each round just into the cylinder. Cylinder's definitely shaky. Close it up, put your pin back in, just make sure it closes all the way. Well, the Clerke first, guys. I'll tell you, it's just a really cheap firearm. And messing around with it, I mean, you can tell that it's cheap. Of course, 22, the recoil is like zero. It's kind of cool to shoot, really. But these, again, started out as starter pistols, and they just kind of developed this. They saw an opportunity with the Gun Control Act. It's double action especially, we've had really good success with it. Single action, we've had a couple of light primer strikes. This is not something that I would depend on for self-defense, but it's kind of just fun, and typically they're very reasonable in price. Now when you're, of course, getting ready to load, got to pull that pin out, kind of different. It's nice that the cylinder is maintained or retained, and then sometimes getting the shells out, they can be a little bit sticky, and part of that's because the 22 just swells inside the cylinder. But I don't know, guys. I mean, it's just one of those inexpensive little firearms. And I like mouse guns. This is a little bit less than what I would really prefer. So, and you got to make sure that that pin is locked into place. You'll feel it kind of click in. But I don't know. It's just kind of fun. If you find one of these, again, upgrade to something better for self-defense. Still a fun little gun to take to the range. And to be honest with you, because of the light recoil and just slow to load, this would be a great gun for kids. But I really wouldn't put a whole lot of rounds through this. Well, guys, the Clerke first, or Clerke worst, however you want to call it, this is something that I would definitely not be interested in as far as a self-defense piece, or even a range toy. You could take it out and shoot it. It's so light recoil that it actually is a pleasure to shoot. It's kind of funny. But obviously the accuracy is not all that great. I've seen some that were way off. This one seemed to be actually okay. But I figured that there were some people out there that had inherited these or found them, or just had one for years and wanted to know a little bit about it. And while there's not a whole lot about it on the internet, the one thing that's for sure is this is known as the absolute worst pistol ever made in the US and possibly the world. So guys, just part of the firearm history. The Clerke first is definitely at the bottom of the trough. I mean, it is low quality. The zinc alloy frame, using German and Italian internal parts, which was kind of surprising. But it's definitely not something that you want to depend on for self-defense. It should be something that just should be in a collection and not necessarily on the shooting range. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America, long live the Republic. Once you pull the hammer back, it does locked, well, there we go. Once we locked the hammer back, and the weight was 16 ounces, and the weight was 16.08 ounces. The Clerke first. The Clerke